Everybody, I am BobbyFi with my man Kenny Hyder. We are going to be talking through the Genesis Open, and it's a loaded field. Definitely the most loaded field we've had in this calendar, since the beginning of the year. And Kay, do you have any sort of general thoughts before I pull up my screen and we start going tier by tier?
Yeah, first of all, I'm really excited. It's here in LA. I will be there Friday and probably Saturday, so that will be fun. Last time I was able to go was in 2019, and I did. And then the past 2 years, they haven't allowed anyone, so it'll be fun to get back out there this year and do that again. But other than that, the slate is very juicy. I told you on Monday morning when pricing came out, I pretty much like every guy that's 7,500 and above, so makes it interesting. And I think, kind of gives us a little bit of a different game to play than we've played the past couple of weeks, and get a little bit more detailed into some strategy tournament build kind of stuff, which I've been focused on mostly, and see what happens.
Sounds good. Yeah, it's loaded, man. It's a lot. There's a lot of things you could do that it's really hard to say someone's doing something wrong by playing almost anybody. It feels like there's just so many guys, and then you could make an argument for ownership on some of these guys because it's really just going to come down to that. I mean, it's not like we have any bad plays, but let's get it started with everybody above 10K. So we're leaving Xander out of this section, but I mean, look, we talk a lot about this. I guess I'll start it off very basically. I understand Rahm is going to be popular. I still don't think the pricing gap is enough between him and everybody else. And I don't think that the ownership, even with him being the most owned, is as high as it should be. Like, you do get Dustin Johnson at 10-2, which is interesting. It's 1,100 discount. It does open things up, but I actually we've seen it over and over again. Last week it was Theegala. We're getting players in the low sixes, mid sixes, top, making every tournament top 5 or top 3 or whatever. But this is going to be a harder one to do it, but there's still a lot of good names even further down the board. So I'm going to try and jam in more Rahm. The other guys I have rated all pretty closely, but I kind of like the idea of playing DJ at 10-2 or Morikawa at 10-4, which I originally was not going to do. But I'm probably going to be mostly on Rahm in this level. How about you?
So what I actually like, so I'm kind of doing a mixture of builds this week. So it's I actually like quite a lot of builds where I have 2 guys in the 10K range. So I'm doing some mixtures of that. I definitely am going to be heaviest in both Dustin Johnson and Jon Rahm as well. Of course, I like Patrick Cantlay. Interesting that he's projected slightly higher to be owned, but it kind of makes sense after last week's performance and just how consistent he is. I think no one's really worried about playing either of them as much as they might be worried about anyone else in the 10K and above range. So I think it's good to have exposure to both. And I'll also be mostly focused on Dustin Johnson and Jon Rahm, and then trying to get combos together with the 10K range where I have Patrick Cantlay and maybe someone else, probably Dustin Johnson as well, but kind of hedging on to Cantlay when I have 2 guys in the 10K range.
That makes a lot of sense. I do think that it's doable. I built some lineups like that already. So there are some, you have to take some shots on guys down there at the bottom who are going to have, but again, these are going to be unowned plays too. So people always say with stuff like that, just when it comes to lineup construction, that if you're going to play 2 guys up there, well, then everybody's going to jam in the other guys. And in basketball and other sports, that makes sense. But you're going to get a ton of plays that are totally viable that wouldn't be a shocking top 20 that are going to be 3% owned. Right. Or less, and you mix a couple of those guys together, find the right ones, and you're in business. All right, let's talk about this next range. Schauffele, I think, is going to dominate the ownership in this range, and I think it's actually going to be more than it's currently projected for. That's just my take. I like Rory, and obviously it's hard not to have a little bit of love for Xander, but the problem is the ownership. It's so much. I think it's going to be much heavier on those guys than it is everyone else in this range, with the exception of Cam Smith, who's a little too cheap. The one guy who no one's going to go back to after winning is Scheffler. And just because he's going to be lower owned, I have some interest there. But I'm sort of struggling a little bit with this range and what I want to do. What are you doing in this range?
So in this range, because of exactly what you just said about Scheffler, I'm going to be hitting him hard. I think there's no reason for, this is not a situation where you know, he had a life-changing event with a win last week. Yeah, maybe his first time, but you know, this guy's good. He's been up there a lot. He's contended a lot. You know, he's fairly priced in the range. And just because I think people will kind of pivot off of him this week, I'm going to double down. You know, he made me money last week, and I expect that, you know, if I just continue that strategy, why wouldn't it continue? You know, he doesn't need to win it. He can, you know, a top 10 is still great. And I agree, you know, I think the projections on Xander are low, especially with, you know, the top being already so highly projected. I think Xander's an easy pivot off the 10K range. So, you know, I'm going to kind of be avoiding him a little bit just because of that, purely for ownership. And I do think this week, specifically because of how low the field is, like you said initially, the ownership is really going to be a huge play. And I think that really comes down to, you know, overall lineup by lineup construction. So that's why I'm saying I'm doing a couple different types of builds and then varying those through, you know, the types of tournaments that I enter. And in no construction will I be focused on Xander at all. Rory, I also kind of like. You know, I love Rory. I'm a fan of his anyway. But it's easy for me to kind of avoid him just because, you know, we haven't really, attention hasn't been on him. Maybe that's the wrong way to look at it. But, you know, I also just think that, you know, there's so much talent in the range and even below it, just below it, that, you know, easy for me to avoid. So I'll be focused mostly on Scotty Scheffler, but I also actually really like Cameron Smith. And a lot of my initial builds, Cameron Smith was, you know, one of the golfers that was coming up all over the place. And I actually had to kind of, you know, phase him out a little bit just because he was, you know, projecting out to be like one of my favorites this week. And actually, I think Sheets liked him a lot too. So, you know, I'll definitely have a mixture of him as well. And, you know, probably a little bit of exposure to Hideki, but, you know, fading above him for the most part.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when it comes down to it, the guys I'll use the most in this range will be Smith, Scheffler, Rory, and then I'm going to go back to a guy because we've never seen this before. I don't know if I've ever played a tournament where Victor Hovland, first of all, wasn't one of the top 5 or 6 price players, and also that he wasn't 20% owned. This might be one of the rare times. And just based on that alone, because we finally saw, I mean, I don't even know if he's ever missed a cut before. I feel like he never has. He missed cut
last week.
What's that? Except for last week. Exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. But then, I mean, look what you have before that. I know, look, they're not all necessarily the toughest tournaments, but 2 wins in his last 4 events. I mean, he's you know, I feel like you could make he and Morikawa might have a little more pedigree, I guess you'd say, but like, I think it's similar. I think they're both going to have good years. So I actually don't mind jumping on Hovland while his ownership is a little bit lower. Let's transition into the 8K range, because I do think that, you know, again, I'm doing a lot in the 7K range. So there's a lot of guys I like here, but I'm probably going to just narrow my focus down to fewer than usual. I'm very interested in Homa. I'm very interested in Gooch. And those are going to be my favorites, with probably a little bit of Zalatoris and Burns. Those will be the guys I play in this range, but pretty much in that order that I just mentioned. Oh, I forgot to mention, Adam Scott as well. Scott, Homa, and Gooch are my highest owned exposures from this range.
Yeah, Adam Scott is definitely a focus for me this week and this entire season, especially in events like this that are so studded. You know, he does well. He doesn't have a problem where he only does well in weaker field events. He does great even when everyone's there. So I'll definitely be on Adam Scott this week, as well as a little bit of Homa, but not as much as I like Burns, actually. And I know Burns won it, he almost won it last year. Remember, we were watching together.
Yeah.
And he was in the lead and then blew it up. And who won it last year? Oh, was it Homa? Yeah, Homa won it. That's right. And they're buddies too. So that was like kind of a sweet tale to watch last week. And I don't expect there to be any reason why the 2 of them both wouldn't be, you know, somewhere in or around contention on Sunday. So I'll be focused on both of them as well as Adam Scott. The rest of the 8K range, I will be including some Zalatoris on like my single entries, just because I think he won't be focused on as much, because people are going to be trying to figure out, you know, the top range, you know, and trying to be tricky there. So I think he'll get overlooked in some of that. But for me, you know, I'm not going to have a ton of exposure to him, except for, you know, in like the single entry higher buy-in kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And by the way, I know he struggled last week. The thing is, so here's my only thing with the Burns thing. And I'm a Burns guy. Like I rode that guy all the way. I think I don't make probably any money last year off of golf, if not from Sam Burns. Some little bits of Matt Wolf. Maybe that was the year before, actually, with Wolf. I know we've seen 2 cuts in a row from Burns. We've seen 2 cuts in a row from Finau, which is just these things don't happen. The price is starting to get a little bit enticing on Finau for me. And the fact that no one wants to play him, and I'm looking at the ownership projections I have, that he's the lowest owned projected player in this whole range, I probably need to include some of that just from a game theory strategy standpoint, right? I'm just going to throw away the way that he's looked and just say, you know what? I don't think that happens again. You could make the same argument for Burns. The only problem is Burns is going to have, right now, I'm looking at 3 times the ownership. And it would not be surprising if Finau was in the top 10 of this tournament. I mean, that's what all we saw from the guy for a while. And it's just been a couple bad rounds that he had, just like Burns. Burns had two good Thursdays and 2 really bad Fridays, consecutive weeks or consecutive tournaments. I don't know. I'm sort of interested in as the more I think it through, that maybe Finau taking a shot, because I don't think he's just collapsed and has now become a bad golfer. And that, we used to have him as a top 6-7 price guy, even in these studded fields, because he was pretty consistent with his finishes. Now you've got him, what is he, the 20th price golfer on the slate? It just kind of appealing to me just from a game theory angle. But I like the other guys better. I just wanted to point out the one low owned thing that maybe we should try to take a little bit of advantage of.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And, this course does rate out pretty well for him. He has the distance, which, isn't the biggest concern here this week, but is a factor, especially when you're talking about approach being a highly concerning factor. The fact is, the closer off the, tee to the hole you are, the easier it is to make the approach. And, his approach game isn't, necessarily the strongest in the field. He's, definitely not great from 100 to 125 yards, but he is in the in the top from those longer distances. So I do like that he has some of that distance, and he does have that approach game that's on the longer side, which suits him better on this kind of course, which is a little bit longer and more difficult. I just don't, for me, it was kind of hard to just fit him in just because of everything that else is going on. And I think this week, especially more than ever this, from the beginning of the year, this week is really the week to kind of focus on what you like and not worry about the rest, because trying to be exposed to everyone, I think, is going to not work out well. You know what I mean? Yep. So.
No, I hear you. I'm thinking about just maybe making a pivot here and there for getting just a little bit of exposure to some of these guys, maybe, 10%, if I could throw 10% of Finau in. I know it's hard to do because like I mentioned those plays, but there's some guys I really like in this next range, just because, again, we get some low ownerships, 7,500 to 7,900. I'm going to say, I understand he's going to be somewhat popular. I think this is a misprice on Paul Casey. I like Paul Casey here. I'm going to play some Paul. I got to scroll down this screen. I'm going to play some Paul Casey for sure. He's probably going to be more owned than what current projections have for him as well. He's a very consistent golfer who, when he's at the top, I used to joke, a couple of years ago, we were joking, what's the difference between Cantlay and Casey? They were like the same guy, basically, it felt like. I just think that the price is a really good price. I'm very, I'm a little hurt because of what Answer did to my chances last week to win the really big one. That was really a real shot, but I do think that he's another 7,700. He's cheap, but I just don't think he's playing very well. And the guy who's sort of sticking out to me as maybe the low owned one that I want is potentially Kokrak here. He's actually played well when he's played recently. Hasn't played as many tournaments, but has been good when he has. And I still think is a little bit of an underrated golfer. And I'm kind of interested in the low ownership, and I'm interested in the low ownership of Power. But the guys who I have that are a little chalkier, I'm always going to be heavy on Neiman, and I'm going to be heavy on Casey when he's in this price tier. So Power, Neiman, Casey, and Kokrak are the guys who I sort of have here. I always want to get your thoughts on Sergio. So why don't you tell me about Sergio and then talk about who you like in this range?
So I like Sergio. Like I said at the beginning of the season, I think he's going to have a great one this year. He is an elite golfer. He's comfortable in star-studded events, and he just is really, really good. And the fact that he is the lowest projected ownership in this range outside of Noren makes me want to just be all over him. And, concerning, so I like what you're talking about on every front in this range, except for Kokrak, who actually in, the 75 to 7,900 range gains the least amount of strokes to the field, which makes me just not like him at all here. This isn't, I don't think that this is really a great, course for him. I don't, think that there's any reason to necessarily think that he's going to top 5 or something like that. So I did definitely avoid Kokrak here, which is, I think, the first time we actually really disagreed so far this week.
I love it.
Also in this range, I mean, the thing about this is what I said at the beginning of the week. I like 7,500 and above. Everything here still looks really good. I'm going to be focused a little bit more on, where I think the ownership's going to go and try to get off the board there. So I'll be a little bit more on, Kevin Na, and a little bit also of Joaquin Niemann, just because I know we like him and think that he's going to have a good future.
Mhm.
And then I also, I'm with you on Seamus. And also on Hoge, these guys have just been playing great lately, and the fact that they're still getting overlooked and not expected to be really highly owned just makes me want to continue to add them in my lineups, until there's a reason not to, and I don't think that this week is a reason not to.
I agree with that, and I think that I should have included Hoagie in the same conversation as I did of Power. Like, I mean, it's just these guys are. I'm sorry, of Noren. These guys are playing well. I mean, he's got two top 2s in the last 3 weeks, top 4 weeks, and Hoagie, and he's also he also had the 14th last week, which could have easily been a top 3 or 4.
Right.
So I actually do think those guys are. I'm just have a little bit of pique a little bit of my interest, but I think that Hoagie is probably a better one than for me actually than Noren. So I probably shouldn't have said that so confidently. I'm a little outside of one guy who I love, and I definitely, I don't even think I overplay, because overall he's done very well for me. I love Corey Connors. I just think at these prices we should be attacking him. It's not an ideal course fit for him. I get that, but it's also not the price that we're used to paying for him at any course, basically. 7,300. Boy, who had Corey Connors on this? 2 months into this, a month and a half into the season, Corey Connors and Sahith Theegala is the same price. When they started basically at the Heath was 6,000 or 6,100, and Corey Connors was 10K almost. Like, I know it's different tournaments, but still just kind of funny and kind of jarring to see. This range, it has a lot of low owned possibilities, but outside of Connors, of course, I'm gonna keep riding the fact that I said Theegala is gonna have the breakout year and everything, and so far he's made me look good. I'm sort of leaning on those guys, but I don't. Oh, and Thomas Peters. Everybody else in this range, I feel like I could take or leave. I always like Siwoo at low ownership, so I considered that. I considered a lot of stuff, but I just didn't fall in love with anything in this range, except for I have a little bit of interest in playing Molinari and Ortiz at the very bottom. And in addition to the guys I mentioned. What are you doing this range?
So yeah, this is where it kind of starts to get interesting, and this is where some of that tricky stuff that I think really could pay off this week. That's where this all lies. Especially in the lower 7K range. So for me, I I hate it because I would love Luke List, but he's just way too high projected to be owned, so I'm gonna just completely go against that.
Mm-hmm.
I also would like Tringali here typically, but I because of just kind of what I think the ownership's going to be on, and Tringali's had a little bit more, he's a little bit more popularity recently. I'm going to be focused mostly on, and I do like the Theegala play. He's been playing great. I mean, last week his performance was amazing. I definitely understand being on him. I'm going to be focused mainly on Siwoo and Bezuidenhout actually this week in this range. They both just, their games are solid. Siwoo is one of those guys who, people don't really think about, but he can be a really great golfer, and especially in big spots. And, his last 3 events, he's had, all 3 top 25s and two 11s, 11th places. He's should be, he was playing well last week. His numbers recently look great. And for him, really, where he does really well is when he's gaining strokes on approach. In the past, last week and the week and 2 weeks ago, He was gaining, strokes on approach, and that's where he's putting up numbers. And if he can just continue that this week, which all indications show he's been playing that way, I'd expect him to, easily top 20 this week. That being said, I also do like, Lanto Griffin in this range. I'm going to actually be pretty heavy on him. And he's a little bit more highly projected in this range, but he's been playing great recently. He has great results here the past 2 years. He's cheaply priced, and I think that there's a lot of upside from him. And he also, his numbers across the board, he's not losing strokes really anywhere. So I'll be heavily focused on him. The other guy that I will bring up that popped up a lot. And Adam Hadwin. I'm going to be back on Adam Hadwin. I like him every week. I think he's a way better golfer than he's priced at. His results recently have shown that, and his price hasn't grown. So I have no problem with anyone being on Hadwin. The other guy that came up a lot for me was actually Harold Varner III. And it was really interesting to see him come up in some of the modeling and stuff that I did. And I ended up disagreeing with the modeling that I had put in and made myself. I don't like him this week, but he did come up for me quite a bit. So I do have a tiny bit of exposure to him just because it was interesting to see him pop so much, in this range for me, which I just totally didn't expect.
Yeah, I actually think that maybe people think the Luke list is so obvious now that we go back to that maybe it won't actually be owned as much as we think, because I think that is it's really good. Again, we want to try, what can you do to have a little bit of edge? You want to try and get ahead on these guys. Well, he's already having a breakout year. I mean, he's got 4 top 20s and 22s in his last 5 events. He's got a first, 3 top 11s. He's really been playing well, and he's a really talented guy who had some success on the Korn Ferry Tour, and a guy who we should be heavy on. And he can hit it. This course actually does suit him. So I just wanted to revisit that because I didn't mention that name, but I like some of the things you brought up. Any thoughts on Ortiz, Vegas, and Molinari at the very 7K range? I guess you could throw Ryan Palmer in that mix too, but any thoughts on these guys?
I like the Molinari play. He's one of those guys that kind of fits the type of golfer I look for typically. Been around tour for a while, is a great golfer when he, has a shot. I don't know about this week. He doesn't seem to really have, any significant advantage on this course. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. It's an interesting play. I do like Johnny Vegas. I mean, he's one of those guys that I expect to be a really, really good golfer long term. I don't know if he's there right now at the season. I haven't really seen him play enough, the past 6 months or so. But I do think he is going to be one of those guys that we see regularly. So I like that play. And yeah, Ryan Palmer, he's a classic. So why not have some of him?
Yep. All right, let's talk about the 65 to 7K range, because there's a lot of guys who I have question marks here that I'm actually trying to squeeze in. Like you said, if I'm going to try and double spend up, I want to play some of these guys. So let's talk through it, because it's not that I love it. First of all, you know me, I'm going to roll a little bit of the general out every week. It's just going to keep happening regardless of what anybody thinks. T10 last week, again, at 3% ownership at 6,500 last week he was. I would obviously sign up for that at 6,800. He's a streaky golfer. His tends to be a higher point scoring player per where he finishes in the tournament because he's so streaky. But I think he's mildly interesting as always. I want to go back to Aaron Wise. I know he struggled big time last week, and he's coming off a couple bad rounds. I believe he's a much, much better golfer than he's been. And the 6,700 price is kind of enticing for me with him, because I really feel like if even if he just like makes the cut last week, he'd be 7,200 or whatever this week. I think we're talking about him as people are playing him in like cash game lineups. I really do. I also like Sebastian Munoz. So I have a lot of, but nobody I feel like I need to have. The one who I'm actually sadly maybe have the strongest conviction on is probably Wise or Munoz. But I'm sort of open to all these guys. Do you have a really strong take? Oh, and I forgot 6,500. Patrick Rogers is great on this course. When Patrick Rogers is good on a course, I'm going to have interest in him too. So just want to throw that out there.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
what do you got for this range?
So I definitely oh wait, we're in 65 to 69.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to say,
Okay. Oh,
I forgot my favorite play, which is Cam Young. I should have mentioned that.
yeah. So I like the Cam Young call. You brought that up last week. I think you're right. He's been playing great recently. He's never played here before, but you know that's a reason that people will overlook someone like that. You know what I mean? And I know I look at course history a lot more than you do, and I prioritize it at least somewhat. Where I know you typically, you know, don't really necessarily consider that as much, but you know, there are actually a lot of guys in this range that have played quite a bit here and done very well. I mean, and Patrick Rogers is one of them. You know, the past 5 years, the worst he had was a 30th, including, you know, a 15th and a 12th. So, you know, I mean, no reason to not be on Patrick Rogers. I definitely have plenty of exposure to him, as well as I do James Hahn, actually also, who has an even better record at this course. And, you know, they both have been playing terribly recently. So, you know, but when you're digging down, you're really digging down, you know what I mean? But I do like both of those guys. I also, you know, I like Gim. I liked him last season. I think he's going to have a better season this year. You know, he didn't do the greatest for me last week, but he did make one of my 5 of 6 cashes, 5 of 6s cash. So that was, you know, helpful. He at least pulled his weight. Whereas the guy who didn't for me last week was Pat Perez, which I'll be back on him again this week. I know he missed the cut. I was there. I watched the whole thing. But he has, you know, he doesn't have the greatest record at this course, but he has played it. He knows it. And, you know, his recent form has actually been pretty decent. If we don't consider, you know, everyone's going to miss a cut here and there. And his ownership is, you know, just, it's lower than anyone around him right there. I like your Kazire play. I don't really have a take on him. I won't be on him as much. I probably should be because, you know, he would have definitely helped me out a couple of times when you called him out and I didn't play him. And as far as Aaron Wise is concerned, I'm going to just go ahead and say no, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. No, I get it. I just think I still think he's going to bounce back at some point. And we have this, and I feel that way about like Mito 6,600 also, which is just kind of crazy to see him there. But no,
Ricky Fowler, by the way, look at this. Ricky Fowler is 6,600.
I know I can't.
I mean, watch him top 10, and we all just slap our foreheads because no one's going to play him.
When it happens, there's certain guys I'm willing to accept that with. The Ricky Fowler is definitely one of them right now. Anyway, but it is like, again, like you can find some gems down here at the bottom that are going to have some chances, and it's going to be harder once you get past the 6,500 exactly range. But there are a couple guys that I have on my list that I thought I would throw out there, and these are no fun necessarily. I'll take a little thing from Rick. This is not an ideal course for him, but I actually think that you know, we saw a good summer last year from Kramer Hickok when he was really playing well, and Rick said there was some stats that sort of made him think that maybe he was playing a little better than so far things have looked, including even like that he got really unlucky. He said at the, you know, American Express. You see him, he's top 20 at the Sony in Hawaii. He was sort of hit and miss last week. He had a chance. I mean, he was 25th going into Sunday last week, so had a chance to put up a number. Had a lousy round. He was actually in one of my big buy-in lineups as Rick recommended him, and he did fine for his price, 6,200. I have the other ones I have just as question marks: Lebioda, Higgs, Straka, Ryder, Grillo, and Redmond. And I don't think I'm going to end up really playing maybe any of those guys, but they all are showing up for me as reasonable guys to take long shots on. So I just thought I'd mention them. The other one is Brendan Steele, who I think is a better than a minimum price golfer. And he hurt me. I had a really bad Thursday last week, had a good Friday, not enough to make the cut. But those are the guys who I'm considering down here. Do you have any agreement? Do you think there's any reason to go down here? Is there anybody you like especially?
Not a whole lot. I kind of have a little bit of interest in the Doc Redmond that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. You know, he's been playing well, at least a little bit more recently. I kind of have a little bit of interest in JJ Spawn. No, sorry. JT Poston, who I go to occasionally, and, you know, a few weeks back didn't work out for me. But, you know, he has a good course history here.
He's been good lately too, by the
And
way, outside that one cut.
right. And you know, the thing about the guys in this range, there's only three that gain strokes. No, four that gain strokes to the field below, 6,400 or below. And those golfers are Aaron Rai, who I don't like this week, and then JJ Spawn, who I also, along with JT Poston, like, because he's just had a great performance the last few tournaments he's played. And he actually ranks out, he's not losing strokes really against any stat against the field. And then Taylor Pendrith, which I know nothing about. And then the last guy who gains strokes against the field in this range is Hayden Buckley, which I also don't like this week because he's been playing terrible recently. So it's really interesting when you kind of look at the total strokes gained against the field. But really you have to kind of think about, in this range, I do think, especially because there's so many question marks, I do think historical, course performance and recent performance are really, really key, because you want guys who are playing well recently, who know the course at least and have played it before, you know what I mean? Have some sort of context of how the thing goes. Because I was watching actually Rick's thing this week. He was saying, there are like 3 of the hardest holes on tour and 3 of the easiest holes on tour at this course. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that makes it, that's really difficult because yeah, you might be able to get a couple of birdies on those easy holes, but if you're double, triple bogeying on the hard holes, you're just not going to have any shot. So you need the guys that are, not making those mistakes. And to me, the biggest indicator, especially in this range, is guys who just have been playing well recently. And that's where I, get to, like the JJ Spawns and the JT Postons with the, course history, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like the Poston idea. I also did, I know I skipped over that guy, but I actually do think I could get behind a little bit of Aaron Rai here. Just at that, 6,400, another guy who I expected to sort of maybe not like hit the top level of golfers this year, but certainly I thought he was going to improve this year. And it's probably worth noting that, when I started playing DFS golf more seriously, Doc Redman was like literally the cheap play. And it was like, he was like a 20% owned play every week at like 69, 7K or whatever. He played really well the last two events at the Pro-Am. I would love it. Hey, if I'm taking a guy at 6,300, I am very happy with the top 33 finish. You know what I mean? And and we know there's probably room for a bit of upside. So I actually just wanted to throw that out. That might be what I do if I force myself into this range. With all of this, here's what this is what I'm really gonna build my lineups off of. This is what me and Cheats do, and it's worked out well for us. And it worked out, another week last week of I've had, you've been there. I've had a couple of top 5s at different times with the most time remaining, with holes to go. And then I didn't, the holes didn't go right. Got a bad bounce for the Gala. So brutal. A bad bounce for the Gala. 5 missed birdie putts for Matsuyama in a row. Like whatever, things happen. But you need those if you want to win those tournaments, especially the ones with 100,000 people. But the one thing I do is I really want to focus on the guys who we like the absolute best and try to play them and mix in my value, my slew of value guys or low owned guys with those guys that we like the best. And if we like them the best, and they're all chalky, you can always find guys to mix in there, especially on a slate like this. So I'll let you start it off. And we've changed the rules now to where we're allowed to pick the same winners. It's not as fun, but we can do it if we want to. But I'm going to let you start it off. Who wins?
All right. Well, I'm going to go with DJ.
Okay. And I'll take Rom. So that automatically means I will force in a DJ Rom lineup. Okay. So let me just make my little notes of the DJ Rom. Okay. And how about below 10K? Who comes top 5? Who's the next guy you like the most, you'd say, under the 10K range?
Scotty Scheffler.
I love that you said that, because that saved me having to try to pitch for this guy again. He's awesome. I'm going to go with Cam Smith. I think we're both pretty much on both those guys. Yep. I do want to say though that Rory and Hovland, Matsuyama, everybody in this range can absolutely win this tournament. And the name who never gets mentioned or played or whatever, Brooks had a terrible Sunday, and I really felt like going into that last day, I thought that he was going to win the tournament. But I do think Cam Smith is the guy I'm going to stick with. All right, let's go to under 9K, and it could be in the 8K range. Doesn't matter which, any range you want, but this is a top 10.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Adam Scott.
I like it. All right. And I am going to go. I have like a dead even between Gooch and Homa. So I'm gonna
Oh,
do an extra. I'm
which I
not.
like
I'm gonna
too.
say Gooch, but I will go Homa right along with them. And hey, they're best friends, so or best playing buddies or whatever. So and I'm always a sucker for a little narrative. It worked. Hey, it worked for Homa last time in LA. You know, like
Yeah,
why not come
absolutely.
back home, win a tournament?
Absolutely.
And he looked great last week, by the way, as well.
He did. He did.
So I love those two. All right, who you got after in the 7K or below range? Who is going to come in the top 20? I'm sorry, 8K and below range to come in the top. It's 7,900 below. Whatever.
79 below to top 20. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go to Hoagie.
Ooh, okay. So I will get a little. Oh, that's good. It'll force me into a little Hoagie exposure. I'm gonna go Paul Casey. I know it's a pretty chalky answer, but I'm okay with it. I do really like him this week, and I actually think that's a bet that I think makes a lot of sense if you want to make a bet for a guy.
Yeah, sure.
It can still okay. So now we need an under 7K to make the cut, which hopefully we do a little better. But who you got?
Okay, I'm gonna say. Oof. I mean, I'm gonna go with Joel Dahman.
Ooh, that was one I was not planning on. Joel Dahman. I'm going to say Mito Pereira because I think his cut making is more likely than some of the other guys. But I do like Cam Young, Kazire, and regardless, even though I know you're not crazy about it, Aaron Wise and Munoz. So I like that 6,700 tier quite a bit. And even the old me is wondering somewhat a little bit. Boy, we really didn't mention Cam Davis's name at all. It was a guy who we were on at the right times at times last year. I'm not doing it, but I think all of these guys make for good low-owned, high upside plays that you can take shots on. So, all right. How about a bust for us? How about a 9K plus to miss the cut?
9K plus. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna say Hovland.
Oh, interesting. Another back-to-back missed cuts for Hovland. That'll make me excited to play him next time he plays. Because it's gonna I'm going to say Brooks. I'm just going with, look, I think he's actually playing better. I think he's taking it more serious. So I don't feel good about it, but I don't have a lot to choose from. And I'll just take the guy who misses the most cuts of anybody. I mean, he misses more cuts than the rest of these guys combined and on average. So like,
sure.
We know there's a variance in his game. I would like to, if could have included Jordan Spieth, he would have been my other one.
The question really comes down to on these ones, who are they paired with? For me, because Koepka, do we know pairings yet? I don't know if
I think we could probably look up pairings, but I don't actually have it in front of me right now. I like to usually do that last thing, and I'll talk about it in the Discord or something. But mostly,
so Koepka is paired with Patrick Cantlay and Patrick Reed. So I think that's a bad bet to miss the cut because that is. He's going to care about his score just playing against Cantlay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and are we crazy not to talk a little bit more about Patrick Reed at 7,400? It does seem like a little bit of a sticker shock in a way that you'd think people would play him. And it's not like Patrick, I guess you call him like he's high variance, but at the same time, it's not like he's like out there missing cuts every week. I don't think he's missed a cut in forever. And he has upside. We all know that. He's 7,400. Should we consider Patrick Reed a little bit more? No?
Yeah, I don't know. I just he's been playing poorly for him. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't know that necessarily warrants fading him, but it doesn't, make me excited about him. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, his stats just are like really bad at this course. What's his? I mean, I want to actually look.
I think he had a good year where I think he played well there once. If I remember correctly, but I could be wrong when my research. There was a lot of guys I had to do some searching on this week because it is, it's not just a loaded field. It's like, it's loaded in every tier until you get to 6,500 and below, in my opinion. But
see, the problem with Patrick Reed is he's just, he hasn't had a tournament that he was good off the tee since last July.
Which
He's
is my
just
reason
like
for maybe.
hemorrhaging strokes off the tee. And this course matters. This is a difficult course.
But historically, he's been a guy who's actually been good off the tee.
Yeah, but he has, I mean, just his recent form is just, you know, this past 6-7 months has just been horrendous for him. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I don't know what it is exactly. I don't follow him individually as a golfer. So I don't know. Maybe he changed a driver or something, and I don't know what's going on with his game, but it makes me scared.
Yep. I understand. I like it. I mean, this is why we talk it through. I did like your JT Poston point, by the way. I didn't mention that before, but I thought that was another low owned guy I could maybe get some interest behind. I thought the one thing I'd like to do is just sort of go through the guys after we talked through everything, the guys who I will probably be playing the most. There's a lot of it's going to be the guys we just named at our thing: DJ, Rahm, Scheffler, Cam Smith, Adam Scott, Gooch, Homa, Casey. But gonna get a little Hoagie, gonna get a little Mito, but I'm higher on the Young, Wise, and Munoz in the 6,700 range. I like all those guys. Gonna get some Luke List. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the Dahmen thing. I don't know if it's a verb, like a visual thing. Like I just can't get myself to play a guy who looks like this.
You don't like the bucket hat.
Yeah. And look, I have definite prejudices. Taylor Gooch's name sounded like a nerdy guy. And then I actually watch him for a little bit and he seems like a cool dude. I think Finau, just strategically, that's the one that I keep coming back to, man. Like, even if it's not right, it's better game theory wise to be heavier on these guys when no one's going to play them. The guys who have always been, I just don't think he's been that bad. And he did almost come back and make the cut after having a terrible, terrible Thursday last week. But again, I just like everybody else in his range better even still. But I'm going to still make sure to force a little bit of him in. I didn't talk as much about him, about Peters, Thomas Peters. Been really, really good, even though he's been playing on a different tour. A lot of good words about this guy. A lot of people who are hyped on him. Joaquin Niemann, Patrick Rogers, Aaron Rye, JT Poston. I know that's like 25 names, but that's basically my pool. I'll be sprinkling in some other guys, but that's basically the guys who I'm going to be picking from. Is there anybody else you want to highlight before we get out of here?
So I do have, looking at my lineups now, I do have quite a bit of exposure to some guys that one, didn't mention, and two, also said I didn't like, including Aaron Rye, which I actually have currently at 19%, which I was unaware of. So that's kind of funny. I also will have a lot of exposure to Sungjae Im this week. A fair amount of exposure to Justin Thomas as well. Sergio, who I already mentioned, I'll have a lot of exposure to. Scheffler is my heaviest. Rahm probably second, maybe DJ's second. I also have quite a lot of exposure to KH Lee this week, actually, who did great last week. He's cheaply priced again. I think he has a good chance at putting up another good performance this week. So I'll have a fair amount of him. Also like Gooch, Cantlay. I also kind of have to have a bit of Matsuyama. I have a decent amount of exposure to, as well as Burns and who else was it? There was someone else that popped up here's one out of the blue that I have currently rostered at 21% is Andrew Putnam.
Oh, okay. I hadn't actually gotten in. Some guys I don't have a great excuse for why I don't play them much, but Putnam has had some really good tournaments. I mean, he had the cut last week, but I mean, he played really well at Pebble. He played well at the American Express, and he played well all the way through the Sony. So I actually think that that's a kind of a cool play that I haven't really considered. And I always like the KH Lee. It's hard, man. We go through so many names, and there's just a lot of good guys, and you got to find the right blend, and hopefully that sticks. And hopefully, on 18 when you drive a par 4, or on 17, it doesn't bounce in the water for you this week like it did for Thagala last week. Good luck to everybody out there. Kenny, thanks so much, man. Always great to have you on there. Always great insight. And we'll be doing it more and more as the season goes on and get ready for the Masters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, good luck, everybody. We'll see you at the top of the leaderboards.